Hello, welcome back to the Pod to Profit podcast. I'm Liz.
And I'm Abby.
In today's episode, we're going to talk about what should be in your show notes.
This is a question that I see pop up a lot in all the different podcasting groups I'm on Facebook.
And I think it's really going to depend, trial and error, see if people read it. But honestly, people are going to do what you direct them to do. So I think it's important to make sure that you let people know to check it out, but keep people guessing, but keep it relevant and important and pop some little Easter eggs in there.
So why this really matters, a lot of podcasters treat their show notes as an afterthought. They usually just throw a sentence in here's what the show is about, and then maybe it's a link to their website. A lot of times I'll look at things, I'm like, ooh, that's really lacking in content. So we want to make sure that as you're getting started on your podcasting journey, your show notes are doing the work for you, sharing the right stuff, and ultimately converting people to buy your products.
Exactly. Your podcast episodes are amazing, but are your show notes doing their job? So the right show notes can grow your audience, they can increase engagement, and they can even boost your SEO.
So whether your goal is to grow an email list, promote an offer, or boost listenership, your show notes are going to be there to help you along the way.
So we're going to break down exactly what to include in your show notes and how to optimize them for your goals.
So why are show notes important? You might think, well, I've already said everything I need to in the audio. Why do I need to put stuff in the show notes too? Doesn't it seem like double dipping? Well, actually, no, it's a huge part of it. And you need to be sure that you're doing these the right way. So a summary of your episode designed to inform and engage listeners is basically what the show notes are. And they appear in different places depending on the listening platform that you're using. I know Apple, when you click on an episode, you see a lot more of them. Spotify, they're a little bit harder to find. So just be mindful that when your listeners are looking for your show notes and you direct people to them, it's going to be different in every place.
So key benefits, first of all, SEO. Search engine optimization. So the show notes with keywords make your podcast more discoverable on search engines.
They're also really a great accessibility tool. They give people a preview of your episodes so they know what they're getting into before hitting play. It's kind of like hitting the info button when you're watching TV.
Exactly. And then they help with engagement. They will drive traffic to your website, to your email list, or offers through clear call to actions.
And they're also a really great way to look really professional. If you have well-written show notes, you're going to build trust with your audience and credibility. They really know what they're doing.
Yeah, so let's talk about some essential elements of effective show notes. So first of all, a catchy title. So create a compelling title that grabs attention and reflects the episode content. So you could put, 5 mistakes new podcasters make and how to avoid them, or how to land your first podcast sponsor in 30 days. Because sometimes the show notes title will not match the episode title depending on it, because sometimes it'll say, episode number or that type of thing. Sometimes they're not the same.
You're definitely going to want to include a brief episode summary in your show notes. This doesn't have to be a 3-page essay on what you talked about. Just a few sentences about the topic that you're addressing. Maybe you're doing addressing the problem that you're solving for your listeners. Just a brief recap of what you're going to be talking about in the show.
So an example would be, in today's episode, we dive into the top 3 ways to grow your podcast audience organically.
If we ever have diehard fans, we're calling them the podience.
Yes. So whether you're just starting out or looking to, let me start over. In today's episode, we dive into the top 3 ways to grow your podcast audience organically. Whether you're just starting out or looking to level up, this episode has actionable tips to help you expand your reach.
Short, sweet, to the point, gets the job done.
Yep. And then time-stamped highlights. So this can be really helpful in certain podcasts, right? If you're really, and especially an educational podcast, where you can kind of break down those moments so that your listeners can jump. I wouldn't even say jump to what interests them the most, because I would fear wow, they'll just skip it. No, they're not, but they want to go back and re-listen to something. So for an example, it could say at 1 minute and 30 seconds, we talk about why audience growth feels so hard. And at 5 minutes and 45 seconds, we talk about the power of collaborations. And at 12 minutes and 20 seconds, the tools to help you analyze your growth. If you are a podcast that is extremely informative and people don't want to stop and take notes because they're probably driving or maybe they're listening to it while going for a walk or something, these can be really nice ways of having your audience happier, more engaged, because they know, hey, I can actually just listen and then I can easily find that spot and go back to it.
I think of it as like, remember those like sticky flags when you're like reading a textbook and you're like annotating things? Like, they're the sticky tags that you can go back and flip to.
Yes, your audience can find it. You can't edit that part out.
I'm keeping audience forever.
Oh, audience.
So another thing that should definitely be in your show notes is your call to action. What do you want the listeners to do after they're done listening to the episode? Encourage them to take a next step. So examples: subscribe to the podcast, leave it a 5-star rating, download the free resources that you have, go and follow you on social media. Tell them what to do next.
Yep. And then next thing is going to be links and resources mentioned. So if you mention, I do this all the time in my flower farming podcast, if I mention a certain tool or seed or company or whatever, or even a sponsor, add that link to any website or book or whatever it might be. And then, any guest profiles or their social media accounts, and just use trackable links or affiliate codes where applicable.
Definitely put your contact information in the show notes as well. It can be as simple as just throwing your email address down there. If you don't want to put your email out to the world, then I guess put your website. Just have a way for your listeners to get in contact with you if they want to. Or heck, sponsors. They might be listening going, I want to be an advertiser on this. Have a way for them to contact you.
Mm-hmm. And then guest information. So try to include a short bio for your guest along with links to their website or social platforms. I think this is so important to be respectful of those that took the time to come on your podcast, at least help people find where to find them.
Mm-hmm. And then keywords for SEO, incorporate relevant keywords and try to make it natural. You can fit them into like the summary. I really like to do takeaways, like bulleted takeaways on all of my clients' show notes. And that's where I kind of can sneak some keywords into for SEO purposes.
Yes. So for example, if your episode is about monetizing a podcast, use related terms like podcast sponsorship or podcast ads or how to make money podcasting.
What is someone going to search? Basically, find a way to fit that in. So some optional things that can go into your show notes. These are, I'd say, encouraged but not mandatory. Quotes or sound bites. So like if there was like a standout quote, like audience, you can throw those down in the show notes, maybe make it bold and say standout quotes, and then engage your audience in quotes below that.
Yep. And an example would be, the fastest way to grow your podcast isn't through ads, it's through collaborations.
Quoted.
And then another one would be social sharing. So make it easy for readers to share your episodes. So, whatever that might be, here's the link to this actual podcast. Make sure you put this into your socials.
Mm-hmm. So some common mistakes to avoid when you're putting your show notes together after you have your episode ready to upload. Don't overload them. People don't necessarily want to read a complete novel when they're going through their show notes. Be sure that your message in there is clear, concise, and very digestible.
And then another huge mistake is completely ignoring SEO. So missing out on that search visibility by skipping keywords. It has to make sense. It has to be natural, but still include those keywords in there where they're relevant.
And another common mistake is not having any calls to action. If you are just wrapping up your show and saying, done, let's move on, you're missing out on so much. Give your audience a next step to take.
And then, of course, a huge no mistake would be not proofreading, right? Because typos can really diminish that credibility.
Now, let's talk a little bit about streamlining this process, because you might be going, oh, this is another thing I need to add to my to-do list of making a podcast. Don't let this be the thing that stops you from starting your show. You can create your show notes in a template form to save time. So like, let's say you know that you're going to put in a summary, you're going to put in a couple quotes, you're going to make sure that you have all of your helpful links, your downloads, and your contact information. You can have most of that typed out and ready to just copy and paste in there.
Yeah. And then, Abby is my podcast producer for Flower Farmer Forum and for the Back to Better Book Club. And I will, a lot of times when I'm uploading that file, we use Google Drive for the file, but then we have a Google Doc back and forth with the date. And a lot of times I'll put, here's the link, just so you know. And most of them, she has them memorized. She knows where to find them. But if it's something like a specific tool, or it's something that I'm trying to really track, if it's a link that I'm really trying to keep track of how many times it was clicked or downloaded or opened or whatever, I will put that specific link right there for her to make her life easier.
And then if writing isn't your strong suit, hire a writer. If you can afford to hire help for your podcast, hire a copywriter, hire a virtual assistant. Find someone that will do that part for you if that's not the part of podcasting that excites you.
Yes. And then in conclusion, again, these well-crafted show notes can be such an addition to all of the work you're already doing. It's like the cherry on top. Just get that little extra. You're doing all the work anyway. This really isn't that much more extra work, but it really can set you apart from your competitors.
And be sure that you head down to our show notes. Here's our call to action. Head down there. Be sure you leave a rating of this podcast, subscribe to it, and check out all of our free resources that we have for you down there below.
Yes, so show notes aren't just a recap, they're a growth tool. Make them work for you.